Hello guys, today we're doing question 53, maximum subarray. Question is a medium question, but I believe it's a bit easier than that. Anyway, the question is given an array, integer array nums, find a subarray with the largest sum and return its sum. The input nums is an array of -2, 1, 3, 4, -1, 2, 1, -5, 4. The output is 6, and the explanation is the subarray -4, -1, 2, 1 has a largest sum 6. So here 4 minus 1 is 3, plus 2 is 5, plus 1 is 6. Example 2 nums is 1, so the output has to be 1 because 1 is the bigger subarray. And example 3 nums is 5, 4 minus 1, 7, 8. The output is 23 because the bigger subarray is the whole array. Okay, I'm going to show you how to do this on the whiteboard. Okay, so we have the array here, and we have a max variable to hold the max that we have currently got while looping through the array, and then we return it at the end. When we loop through the whole array, the max will be the biggest max we've come across so far. And then the sum represents the current sum that we have. So we're going to loop through we're going to set the sum and the max right now as the first value in the array, which is -2. The reason being is because if we set it to 0, initiate to 0, and the array is the first value of the array is smaller, and we never come across a bigger value, the array is set to 0, but the bigger substring will be smaller, so the return max will be incorrect. So we now initiate it to -2, then we loop through the array, starting from 1. So now I is 1, which is 1, mat1. So each time we loop through the array, if the sum is smaller than 0, we set it back to 0, because if the next value is positive, we know that sum will be bigger, starting from positive itself. And if the sum is negative, if you add a positive, it will be smaller than it could be. That makes sense. So for example, -2 plus 1 will be -1, but if you set this to 0, the bigger subarray will be 1 rather than -1, because the 1 in itself is a subarray starting from that one anyway, and it's bigger than -2 plus 1. So we set the sum to 1, and now we're at max, and we set the max to either the max or the sum, whichever is larger, which is sum, so we set this to 1. Then we increment I again. We're now at 2, which is -3. So -3, 1 minus 3 is -2, which is smaller than 0, so we set the sum to 0. Is it bigger than the sum? No, so we continue. Now we increment I again. I is 3. We're now at 4. So sum 0 plus 4 is 4. So we set the max to either the max or the sum, whichever is larger. Sum is bigger, which is 4, so the current max is 4. Then we increment I again. I is now 4. We're at -1, so sum is 4 minus 1, which is 3. As it's not smaller than 0, we leave it as that. Then now we compare the max 4 or 3, which is bigger 4, so we leave the max the same, and we increment I. I is now 5, which is 2. So we add 2 to the sum. Sum is now 5. Now we compare the max and the sum, which is larger, the sum. So we set the max to the sum, which is 5. And then we increment I again. I is now 6. So now we're at 1 here. So we add that. Sorry, 1. So we add that to the sum. So the sum is 6. Then we compare the max to the sum. The sum is larger, so we set the max to the sum. And then we iterate. We go to the next while loop, to the next value of I, which is 7. 7 is -5. Here we remove 5 from the sum, which is now 1. Compare it to the max. Max is 6. The sum is smaller, so we leave the sum as that. Go to the next I, which is A. We increment I to 8, sorry. Now I is 4. We add 4 to 1 for the sum. Sum is now 5. What's bigger, max or sums? Max is bigger, so we leave it at 6. Then we increment I, and now while loop is finished, as we loop the whole array, we return the sum, which is 6. As you can see, it was this one, and that is the expected value. So I'll show you how we do it in code. Okay, so the first thing we do is create a max, and we set it to the first value of the array, which is num0. We do the same for the sum. Then loop through the array, starting from the second number in the array. Sorry, 1. And as long as it's smaller than the array, then we continue. So once we get to the end of the array, it breaks. Once we finish looping through the array, sorry. Then we check if the sum is smaller than 0, we set it to 0. Else, we add to the sum the current value. Next, we add the value to the sum anyway. So if the previous value was -2, we get to this one. If it's smaller than 0, set to 0 and we add the current value. And then we set the max to the current max between, we set to the max between the current max and the current sum. And then we return the max. Let's run that. That passes, let's submit. Okay, as you can see, that's one of the first time complexities. The time complexity of O(n). That's worst case looping through the array, the whole array. No, we are looking for the whole array. And the space complexity of O(1), as we're storing constant variables here and a constant variable here. Thanks for watching.